Hi, everyone. Welcome again to the Greatness Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Weiss. I'm a speaker, author, life coach, and founder of the Greatness Movement based here in Phoenix, where our goal is to guide you to be the greatest version of yourself. Well, we have some kind of good news, I guess, today. I got an email on Friday, and there will be a TEDx event January 23rd, 2020 in Chandler, Arizona, and they asked me to come speak. So that's kind of cool. If you're curious, there'll be, I know it's going to be a great event. You're going to walk away with a lot of good information. Like I said, I know a couple of the other guys, they're just fabulous. So one of them you'll just have to show up yourself. So I'm not exactly sure when tickets go on sale. She said in the next week or two, I'll get marketing materials that I can start putting out. So keep an eye out for that if that's something that interests you and you'd like to see me speak live and see several other great speakers and walk away with a lot of good information. That, like I said, in the next, as soon as I get that information, which I would guess, maybe it won't be till after Thanksgiving or who knows. We'll see. Keep an eye on my pages and you'll find out. As always, for those of you, if you think what I talk about is valuable and can help those that are close to you, please share, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Spreaker, iTunes, whatever the format is. If you think what tonight's show is about and you think it can help people, please pass it on to others so they can live in the greatest version of themselves. So tonight what we're going to talk about is how to deal with a difficult child. Children, let's face it, love them to death. They're a pain. And primarily they're a pain because none of us take a class on how to be a parent. We learn from parents who didn't either. And I was watching, actually, sometimes I watch Gold Rush. Do you know that show? It's about guys that mine gold up in Alaska or I don't know, way up north. Anyway, this one guy, his wife's pregnant. He left the camp to go see not sonogram. What is it? Where they look at the baby and determine the sex. And, he was talking about how overwhelming it is. He doesn't even know how to swaddle a baby or hold a baby. And I marvel at our civilization, at the single most important thing we do in life is have a kid. And we all just wing it. Like literally just wing it. We just don't get prepared for it and don't really, we just think that whatever our parents did was fine. Like, we're alive, we turned out okay, so that must be enough. Unfortunately, that limits our potential. That's the easiest way to say it, or kindest way to say it, is it really limits our potential. And I'd like to change it. That's part of why I do this. I would love to see a society that when they get the exciting news that they're pregnant, or even before then, it just becomes something we all do. We go learn about how to be a parent. And because that lack of learning is really what creates a difficult child. The science is overwhelming that just if you, and this isn't a blame thing of mothers, this is just how the brain and body work. But if you were a mother and you were stressed at all during pregnancy, the studies show your child's brain literally in that moment completely changes and becomes something different. And so that's why a lot of children are born with diseases or certain afflictions, is mom and dad's emotional condition during pregnancy creates that. A lot of people aren't aware of that. That's a shame. Now, again, this isn't a blame thing, but it goes back to the central mission of the greatness movement of, get all of us getting more educated on how all of this works so we can all live better lives. And so this is going to be a tough truth to hear, but in every single case I've ever run across with difficult children, all they're ever doing is mirroring mom and dad's emotional struggles. I haven't seen a case where that's not evident. Well, there will be an exception. You have a child who could be born with Down syndrome or something, but as I said, studies show that can be created in pregnancy. and alter a child's DNA and brain structure and everything. So, there are some children that are born with maladies, but I'm going to take that part out of the discussion. Let's say, that's not apparent here. And you have a child that's acting out a lot, of any age, whatever age it is. The first thing I want you to recognize is, and this is the common mistake parents make, is they look to the child, and usually what they try and do is control and control the child's behavior and get them to conform to something. And that's not the way to do it. If your child is acting out in some fashion, they're screaming back at you what you're struggling with emotionally. And so what I want to do tonight, versus a lot of my shows, I get into a lot of the science of things. And tonight I want to stay more away from that. I've just given you a little, there's tons of it. Please go research it. If you disagree with me, go research it. Go become an expert on your own so you can see, oh my God, he's right. Our children become our emotional state. That's just flat out the way it is. But I want to stay out of proving that to you. And, because that can come across as condescending or judgmental, or I'm putting you down. And that's not my goal. My goal is to provide you with information and solutions. And so tonight I want to use a lot of examples of kids that are struggling, and ways to mitigate that, and what to look for in yourself. So in the Greatness Movement community group this morning, it's the private group I've talked about on previous shows. And if you're the type of person who's ready to do the work, ready to learn and become an expert in your imperfections and what's keeping you from your greatness, then please go send a friend request, or an invite to join the group. And this is, like I said, it's not a victim place. It's not a place to dump your sorrows. Please dump your sorrows, but ask for a solution. That's the key to it. This is a group dedicated to people that are looking for answers, not just an emotional dumping ground, so that they can co-opt other people in and not work the plan, not work a solution. So, but I had posted telling them, this was kind of the topic I was going to discuss, and anybody in the group want tips on certain things. Well, one of the members talked about this person has 2 children. And they described the first child as very high strung, a worrier, someone who's this child's an overthinker, very much into doing the right thing, and what's fair, what's fair for people, and especially when other people don't follow the same rules. So what they're describing here is a child who's very black and white. And worrying, overthinking, high strung, doing the right thing, that's perfectionism. Well, that's fear. This child's in massive fear. And remember what fear is. It's the fear of rejection, inadequacy, or powerlessness. Well, all of these behaviors are as a child who's incredibly fearful and powerless. So what that tells me is mom and or dad or both have struggled with powerlessness. And so they probably really tried to control their child, or even if their parenting style has been completely the opposite. In general, mom and or dad or both are struggling with these exact same things. They probably really worry. They probably overthink. They probably have high stress jobs or high stress lives. I mean, let's face it. If you had nothing to do in your life but raise your kids, you'd be massively stressed, because we don't teach how to deal with fear and stress and all that stuff. So we're all of us are lacking in those basic skills. So we bring that to the table, and our kids are just mirroring that. So if you have a child like this, one of the solutions is power. This child needs power. And before I get into that, the second child is into wanting things now. They're impatient and testy. Well, what does this child want also? Power. You see, there's a common theme here. Mom and or dad are very powerless. And so both the kids are. Now they're expressing it in completely different ways, but they both feel incredibly powerless. And so they're trying to exert that power, so they feel safer. Because one of the worst feelings we can have as a human being is feeling out of control and powerless. That's incredibly scary. Well, I'm sure if mom and dad looked at themselves, they'd see their childhood was incredibly powerless. That's how they learned all this. And so they're probably very jumpy inside. And, you know, again, that can be expressed. They can express that by being very controlling, or they can express that by being very helpless and you know, always worn out. Oh my God, you guys are driving me crazy. Things like that. That's a powerless position. Mom or dad is being controlled by the kid's emotions. They can't regulate themselves, so now they're placing blame on the kids for their emotional state. Well, if you react to anybody, whether it's a child or an adult, that's about you. Nobody makes you feel anything. You can choose. Think about it. There are times in your life where the exact same situation has happened and you've been like, ah, no big deal. Other times you've just gone completely berserk. Well, that's a you know, all determined by your emotional condition in that moment. And so the more emotional work you do on yourself, the more consistent and level you'll be. So one of the ways to help kids with powerlessness is turn everything into a decision or into a choice. Lay the power at their feet, okay? So simple things like somebody who's, okay, let's take this. They want things now. But let's say you're in the car and obviously you can't give them something that's at home now. So you turn, instead of, what would happen is, Mom, I need this from the house. Well, we're not there. And so what do? You start yelling at them and saying, look, we can't even get there. Stop your complaining. We're not at the house. We won't be there for 15 minutes. I don't want to hear any more about it. Well, look at what just happened to you. Now, do you wonder why you have a child who's high strung? Like, if this is how you reacted to one child, well, the other child sitting in the car, no wonder they're high strung. They're a worrier. They're an overthinker. They're trying to decide what's right and wrong and what's fair and that everybody play by the rules, because they're watching your emotional reaction with this one, with their sibling. Instead, the response would be, Joseph, I understand that you want it right now. What option do you think we can come up with? Because right now we're stopped at a stoplight and we're 15 minutes from the house. How do you think we can get that? See, now you've placed responsibility on them. Now they get to figure out, well, we should get a plane. Oh my God, I love that idea. How could you put wings on this car so we could fly through this intersection? See, all of a sudden it becomes this exploration. Now the fight's gone. Now you've got them into their imagination. But see, parents are so underdeveloped emotionally and they feel stress because they want their kid to stop. They don't know how to stop it. They love them. They want their child to have what they want. But because they're so codependent and tied into, my child is stressed out, and that's a sign of my inadequacy as a parent. Remember what fear is: inadequacy. I don't have the skills, tools, or knowledge to get my child what they need. I want everything for my child, but the more I stay in this place, the more detriment I do to my child. Because what happens next? Now I'm powerless. So usually what most parents do is they go big. They get angry. Well, anger is the exact opposite of power. It's false power. It's because we feel so empty and small inside, we try and get big. Well, gee, I wonder why your child is impatient and testy. Okay? So the solution in almost every parenting situation is to put the responsibility on your child to come up with a solution. Stop, please. Stop trying to fix your child's problems. And this is probably the single greatest, mistake, I don't know the right word to say, that parents make. They think they're loving if they want the best for their kid and they never want their kid to suffer and they want to take care of them. Like, I was getting my hair cut yesterday and I was sitting there in great clips, and there was this gentleman with his son and it was their turn to go. And so he takes the son over to the chair, like grabs him, and he's walking him, and he pulls him up. And, son's, I don't know, 8 years old, booster chair, and puts him in the chair, and his hands on his shoulders. And he's telling, the lady, I want this and this and this and this and this. And the kid's just sitting there like this, head down, completely defeated, like just disinterested. His whole posture was completely shut down and beaten down. And so once he communicated what he wanted the hairstylist to do, then he stepped back about half a foot, and he stood there, and he was fidgeting, playing with his hands. This is the father, and then he tried to take a step away, and he kept looking at his son, and he's like, he was so worried about his son. He finally kind of sat down, and then he kept peeking around. They had this little flag, kept peeking around, standing up, like he was so overwhelmed with concern about his child. Well, his child feels smothered. His child has no ability to express himself because dad cares so much. Well, no, dad's in so much fear. See, that's dad's emotions. Dad can't control himself. And so he's using his son as a proxy under the guise of, I care so much about my son. No, dad, if my son isn't totally safe and cared for, I'm gonna die. Well, that's not love, because that's about the father. And that leads me into really a parent's role. And I always use this analogy. I want you to think of a kind of not backwoods, but an isolated 2-lane road. We've all been on them, driving through the country, something peaceful. That's what I want you to think about. Well, think about that road. There's always a double yellow line in the middle, right? And then you have your 2 lanes, the white lanes, the soft shoulders, and then there's usually farm fence, right, on each side. Well, parenting goes like this. When our kids are born, we as parents, we're the yellow lines, right? The kids can only live in between that small little space because they're infants. They will literally die if we remove one side of that, and they're allowed to roam, right? They'll put their fingers in light sockets. They'll eat the wrong thing, poison, tumble down the stairs. So as infants, we are the yellow lines. But as children age and mature, we need to pull back those yellow lines and give them more access to the road. So here's an 8-year-old child. That 8-year-old child should be allowed to express his needs and wants for his hair, not the father. All right? See, dad is all about this. Dad's keeping that 8-year-old between those lines, and he's panicked that anything might happen to his child's hair, something that, if it didn't go well, is perfectly fine. Just give it a month, it'll all grow back. But he's also so involved in his child's life, he won't let his child climb up the chair and get into the booster chair. He has to pick him up and get him situated and make sure he's okay. He's still parenting as though his child was in between those 2 yellow lines. Well, that's suffocating a child. Instead, you want to give them space, and as they get older and into their, just preteen, now they have use of the full road. Like, you want to keep them off the shoulders. That's drugs and other things like that. So you're here just tapping them back, right? But now as they move into, teenage years, high school and everything, now you give them access to that soft shoulder, and you're the fence. This is where they get to experiment and they get to fail. Like, you want your child failing as early as possible. Well, what you would call failing, I call it succeeding. But you want your child stumbling, bumbling, and making mistakes nonstop as early as possible. The reason you want that is because as they get older, and when they make those mistakes, if you back out and stop trying to fix it for them, they will learn critical thinking skills to come up with solutions, not play the victim, and they will always look for a solution. All right? I'm going to give you an example of what that would look like. We've all had this experience. I was my youngest daughter, we were going through the store. I think she was 8 or 10 years old. And what does every kid do at the grocery store? Mom, Dad, can I have this candy? Right? Go down the candy aisle, get anywhere in the cash register. They're grabbing the gum, the chips. Come on, right? They barrage you with it. And what do? No, dinner soon. No, you can't have that. You've had enough candy today, right? We argue with them. Wrong. That's the last thing you want to do. That's keeping them between the yellow lines. You're not teaching them anything. You're just teaching them no. That doesn't grow your child. And so when you let them off to college, they have no critical thinking skills. And that's why most kids in the first year of college, that's when they get raped, overdose, suicide. Their most vulnerable time is that time because you've kept them between the yellow lines. You've never allowed them to stumble and learn critical thinking solution skills. So anyway, we turn down the candy aisle. She grabs this big bag of candy and goes, Dad, can I have this? And I'm like, well, of course you can. You bet. And she's like, really? I'm like, well, sure. So she throws the candy into the cart. And she goes, I can't believe you're going to get that for me. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get it for you. She's like, what do you mean? You said I could have it. And I said, yes, I said you could have it. I didn't say I'd pay for it. She kind of, well, just total posture drops. Well, if you're not going to get it, how am I going to pay for it? I'm like, that's a great question, Caroline. How are you going to pay for that? Right? For those people listening, I'm crossing my arms, big pout face. All right. She gets kind of angry and pouty and kind of stomps off. Because now I've placed the responsibility, like I want my kids to have candy all day, every day. Candy's wonderful. I'm just not going to pay for it, right? And so she kind of stomps off and she comes back to me and she goes, Dad, I think I know how I can pay for it. I'm like, really? Oh my God, I can't wait to hear. How? She goes, well, what if I set up a lemonade stand at the apartment? That way I could make the money to pay for it. I'm like, oh my God, Caroline, brilliant. Wonderful idea. I love it. How are you going to pay for the lemonade? Oh, same thing. Face falls, arms crossed, stomps off, pouting. Right? I keep my mouth shut. See, I'm not giving her the solution. I'm laying the problem at her feet. See, my daughter's smarter than I am already. I know that. That's why I'm giving her the opportunity to show me how smart she is. Also, I'm keeping my emotions in check because this isn't my problem. My daughter wants candy. She gets to figure out how to get candy. That's the problems parents make. That's the mistake parents make. They think they have to solve every problem. No. Your job is to let them figure out how to solve their own problem. That's parenting. It's not controlling them and beating them into submission and making them into a mini me that does what you want. No, it's allowing them to flourish and figure out what they want. She wants candy. She came up with the idea of a lemonade stand, realized, man, I got to pay for that too. So then she comes back to me, we, circling through the store, we get a couple aisles further, and she's like, Dad, what about this? What if I do some chores to pay for the cups and the lemonade and then the candy? And I was like, wow, that's a great idea. What chores are you going to do? And she kind of stomped a little bit because I'm not giving her the answer. She said, well, what if I cleaned the bathroom? I'm like, oh my God, that would be great. I hate cleaning the bathroom. How much are you going to charge me? See, I kept walking her through it over and over and over. I got her to set her own price and realize, okay, that's not enough. And then I took her, I'm like, let's go see how much the cups and lemonade cost, right? So we went down the lemonade aisle. We started pricing everything. We realized she needed about $12 to cover everything, the candy, the lemonade, all the stuff. Then we negotiated what she was going to charge for vacuuming, for cleaning this and that. Do you see what I just did? I just taught my daughter how to run her own business. That's the value of giving a child power. See, I extended the lanes. I gave her space to roam and pout and figure out her emotions. I wasn't so self-consumed with, oh my God, I need my daughter to love me and never suffer. And she's so angry that she's not getting candy. And oh my God, I don't want to see my daughter suffer. Oh, this is awful. Or like the man in the chair. Oh my God, what if my son slips off the chair and bumps his head? Oh no, and then his haircut's bad. Please stop. That's what creates a child who's high strung, a worrier, an overthinker, has to do the right thing, doesn't, thinks things are unfair if someone doesn't follow the rules, or somebody wants things now. Give them responsibility for fixing the problem and coming up with the consequences. I had a client come in this week. It must be parenting week. And he has a daughter who struggles with leaving the house on time. She's never on time. And so we talked about these principles. And so he said, hey, I kind of did what you said. I walked in the morning and said, hey, we're going to stop yelling at you nonstop about getting ready. I just want you to know we leave at 8:15. Now, the morning was much quieter. Everything was great for the most part, but she was still late. And so as we talked about it, I asked him, I said, what one step are you missing? See, I don't even, I'm coaching my clients to become their own coach. And finally, after several questions, he discovered, oh, wait a minute, there's no consequence if she's late, right? It all ends up the same. And so I said, the key when it comes to things like this, when you want control of your child, when you need them ready or need something done, then you do the same thing. And so you turn to the child who won't leave on time. And you go, look, you have a discussion and say, look, Susie, we have to leave at 8:30, and here's why. Mom has to be at her job. Dad has to be at her job. We have to get you to this school, Joey to this school. It takes us this long, and that's why it's important. Now, it's important to us. I see that to you, it's not important. But that doesn't work in this house. And so what I want you to do, Susie, is I want you to go off and think about what plan can you put in place to be ready to leave by 8:30? So you allow your child to go off and think about it. And then when they come back with their plan, you say, okay, so what's the consequence if you're not ready by 8:30? What should we do then? See, now instead of you being the screamer and yeller and discipliner, you're teaching her how to discipline herself. That's parenting. It's not control and forcing them in the lines. It's expanding the lines and allowing them to maneuver in between those lines and find solutions that keep them most often on the road and spending less time in the ditches. But the more we box them into those double yellow lines, the more as they age, they're going to go screw you and they're going to live in the ditches. This is where they'll live because they're like, I need power. You took it from me. You were so concerned about how difficult my life would be. I want my life difficult because mom, dad, it's the only way I learn. I had here's the heartbreaking example that I'm going to end with. I had a woman get in touch with me because her son suffers from social anxiety. And he just shuts down. And as I do with any parent that's going to bring a child in, he was older. I think he was in college. And I always say to them, what if we found there might be some things you could do? Would you be willing to be part of the process? In all my years of doing this, I've never heard somebody so excited and so willing to be a part of the process. She was like, oh my God, yes, please. It was the perfect answer. Well, we get in and I meet with her son, and the bottom line is her son has had no life. Mom checks up on him nonstop. Why do you like this? Why do you like, he plays video games. She's constantly critiquing. She's worried about his future, wants him to do better. He's only in high school. He went out 3 times. And one time he was with a friend who got drunk. So whenever he leaves the house, regardless of what time, she checks his breath. She's just massively concerned about his well-being. And so it took me about 3 minutes in for me to realize why this child or this young adult has so much social anxiety. So I brought the mom back in, and and as I figured, she's like, "So what did he say?" And I was like, "Well, that's a discussion between he and I." But again, she wanted to crash boundaries. She wanted to live between the yellow lines. And I explained to her that while her son is struggling, I think we could fix, I think there's some easy solutions. And I said, what if I told you there might be some things you could do? And she's like, "Oh my God, tell me all of them. I want to do them all." And I said, "Okay, well, the first place to start is, could you tell me a little bit about your childhood?" And she went on about how her childhood was perfect, which almost every adult says. And that, her parents were great, very loving and supporting. And that, very rarely got in trouble because I always knew where the line was. And I went, "The line? What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, well, with my parents, I knew where the line was." And I was like, "So how did you know where the line was?" And she goes, "My dad would give me the look." And I went, "What look? Can you show me?" And when she did it, like, it scared the living hell out of me. It was menacing. It was condescending. It was brutal. And I said, "So what did it mean if you got that look? What did it mean to you?" And she said, "Well, if I got that look, it meant I better straighten up or I'm going to get punished severely." And I said, "So what did you learn?" She said, "Well, I learned to be perfect." There's that word again, perfect. And I said, "Well, can you tell me what it felt like to get that look? Like, go back and think about it now. Can you tell me what that was like?" She said, "Oh yeah, I panicked." I'm like, "You panicked? Well, where did you feel that?" She goes, "My stomach." And I'm like, "Okay, can you go there right now? Can you think about that feeling right now?" And as she did, she started to get really agitated and really uncomfortable. And I said to her, um, "Are you feeling that right now?" And she's like, "Yes." And I said, "Is there someone else you know that has a similar feeling?" And this is what happens when denial hits somebody. Her eyes started darting. She started to fidget in her seat. She kind of looked down and she's like, "No, I'm not sure." And I said, "Well, is there somebody close to you who has described having the exact same feeling in social situations?" She dropped her head and wiped her pants and she goes, "My son." "So are you trying to tell me I'm a bad mother?" I said, "No." She goes, "That's what my husband says. My husband says that I'm too strict, that I pay too much attention to him." And I said, "Well, I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is you just described about having to be perfect, and that if somebody isn't perfect, you learned in childhood that major trouble was coming. And so by listening to how you parent your son, you want his life to be perfect. Everything has to be perfect. Can you see how what you went through in childhood is getting transferred down to your son? And your son gets in a social situation and feels like he has to be perfect, and therefore he shuts down and panics." Well, our time was up, and I asked her, would you like to continue this process? And she said, "Yes, I'm going to learn so much. This is going to be so beneficial." And so they bought a package of 10 sessions. And honestly, I was shocked. I was like, "Man, my radar is off. I better check things." Because this woman is so excited about dealing with the root cause, which is her pain. And that's all kids are doing. They're showing you your own unaddressed pain. And I was kind of surprised she was so willing. Well, in less than an hour, she called me back and canceled all the sessions. And, um, you know, commended me for everything she learned, all this stuff, and how it was the perfect answer. But they're going on trips and other things, and they'll get back in touch. And because we definitely wanted to do, again, it was the perfect answer. And that's what I found with parents. When their kids are struggling, they don't want to point the finger at themselves. And when they find out that they could do something about it, they don't want to go clean up the pain from their own childhood. And so they will sacrifice their child to not have to do that. And that's what this woman did. Now, I don't blame her for it. I know how scary that can be. But at least in my experience, I have yet to find a child that's struggling in life, and it's not a direct reflection of how mom and or dad are struggling in their life. So that's what I want you to encourage you to do. I want you to pay attention to the behaviors of your child and see how they mirror your own life. That's the first step. Become aware of how your emotional condition is being replayed by them. What in your life do you feel powerless and they're doing the exact same thing? So when you see your child acting out, instead of trying to correct them, go look in your own life and do the work in your own life. I tell stories in my book, Your Journey to Success, of in a situation just like this, and a mother was all freaking out when she cleaned it. When she went and dealt with herself, her kids stopped freaking out. There's countless examples. Every client I've ever had, this is always the process. Regardless of the age of their children. So that's the first step. Become an expert in the feelings that you're having a hard time dealing with. Watch how your children are a mirror and literally showing you exactly what you need to address. All right. The second thing is, remember the analogy. Please, as early as possible, give your children the problem. Turn everything into a question. When they demand something, put the responsibility back on them. Make them process and figure out how to solve the problem. Let them set the consequences. Like with my older daughter, she hated going to bed. And so I'd go, I get it. I totally get it. I wouldn't want to go to bed either. But you have two choices. You can either walk to the bed, or I can pick you up and carry you. Which one would you like? See, I gave her a choice, and she'd be screaming and yelling. And instead of arguing about trying to get an answer from her, I would always reply, so I think you've decided that you'd like me to pick you up and carry you. See, I wouldn't have the discussion with them. And their behavior showed me the choice that they made. And so then in the morning, we'd talk about, what eventually happened is she talked about how she hated being carried to bed. And I said, so what are your options? Again, I kept giving it back to her. So those are the solutions for you. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, tonight. I hope that gives you some help with your children and helps quiet things down. You're going to see when you do this, parenting gets much quieter, much more sane. It'll be much easier for you. Okay. Remember, as I always say, whenever we judge, blame, and criticize, the only reason we are judging, blaming, criticizing, hating anyone or anything is because we see a part of ourselves we haven't reconciled. Pain that we haven't dealt with. We are doing the exact same thing. It's a 3D movie screaming back at us what we need to address and forgive ourselves for. The opposite of that is also true. Whenever you see greatness in somebody, the only reason you can see that greatness is because you have it in you. Now, if you don't feel that, if you don't see that, if you feel detached from that, the greatness movement is for you. All right, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
I can do anything. I can reach any goal.